Black like me. Black like me. Black like me.
You're listening to Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G., a podcast that invites you to experience the world through the perspective of one black man, one conversation, one story, or even one rant at a time. Here's Dr. G.
Hey, good people. I want to welcome you back to another exciting episode of Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G. One of the things that I pride myself in is bringing in interesting guests into the studios, folks who can have these wonderful conversations with me. We can talk about what's going on in the world inside their lives, but ultimately its impact on Black individuals, Black society, Black thought, Black progress. And today is no different. This is going to be another one of those scintillating conversations. I have back in the studio Mr. Ben Wikler. I'm really happy to have him here. Let me just tell you, he's been on the show enough times that if you don't know who he is, that's really on you. That's not my fault. That's not our fault. But for those of you that are tuning in for the first time, you're just joining us here in season 11. Welcome. Mr. Wikler has been involved in politics and political campaigns since childhood here in Madison, Wisconsin. Although he has a national reputation, he hails from Madison, Wisconsin. I believe we're from the same high school, the same alma mater, Madison West High School.
That's absolutely right.
He has worked on many campaigns, but perhaps the most notable has been Ada Deer when he was only 11 years old. Tammy Baldwin, Russ Feingold, and many others. Many folks my age came to know Ben because of his work with MoveOn.org and the many political issues that Move On fought for. During his years as the chair of the Wisconsin Democrats, Ben helped to achieve so many successes that news outlets called it a winning machine. And you don't hear that a whole lot, Ben. And the only state party with its own distinctive brand. If I can add, Ben just recently ran for the chair of the DNC and fell short of that victory, unfortunately. But he's now looking for what's next for him, and he's announced that he will be stepping down from his position at Wis Dems, and we are lucky to have him on the show today. Mr. Wikler, how are you doing?
It's great to be back on the show. It's funny, we're in this moment that I think of really as a national political crisis. And
yes.
At a personal level, I'm doing pretty well. And it's the funny thing that in Wisconsin, I think in part because we've been building and organizing across race and ethnicity, across geography, every square inch of the state for years now, we're in actually really good political shape. I think we have a chance to win enormous victories in the years to come. This spring, we won a victory over Elon Musk and his, the state Supreme Court justice that he was supporting, elected Susan Crawford in a way that was incredibly gratifying and also means that there's no chance that the right wing will take over our state Supreme Court. And it showed the whole country that it's possible to fight back in this moment. And that just gave this huge burst of positive energy. And it was after that I made the final decision to pass the torch as state party chair because I think the state is going to head in a really good direction. And so now, knowing that I'm going to be able to be wrapping up my time as chair this spring, I got to chaperone my daughter's field trip at school, and I'm taking her to a Beyonce concert this weekend in Chicago.
Oh, really?
Like all these things that have been really hard to make time for during these last 6 years, I have a little bit of space to actually take a breath, and that feels really, really good.
Well, I have to say, Ben, that we appreciate your public service because it's not an easy thing. And I'm sure people have come to know you because of MoveOn.org and other things because you're highly profiled and you do good work for the state. But it does come at a cost. And but I want you to know that we appreciate that hard work and the commitment and wanting not only the state but the nation to be its very best. And I'm sad to see you step away from those positions. I guess it's too late to say, hey, can you change your mind? But I'm glad that you've had this experience. And perhaps now you're far enough away from the announcement that you're leaving and close enough to that departure date. And in this safe Black space, present company included, in this safe Black space, if any nuggets of truth or any ways in which you want to communicate anything in this Black space that you weren't able to in the others, I want you to know this is a no judgment zone and you're free. And so I just want you to know that, sir.
I'm grateful for that.
Yes. It's so we take a look at like the work that you've been involved in, and I'm just curious in this post Obama era, people have been asking about the Democratic Party. Folks have been jumping ship. Folks have been talking about three parties, an independent party. I'm just curious, as you're reflecting back on just the current tenor of what's happening, and I'm sure you're hearing people say, where's the vision, or what's going on? What are we doing? I love the optimism that you have, and I'm hoping that you lift me up, because I'm feeling a bit pessimistic in some things, and not cynical, but just a bit pessimistic because I need us to do better. But I'm curious, just from your perspective, what are some of the top opportunities for the party statewide, and then if you want to, you can
Sure.
comment nationally.
So this is, I think, my central reflection, because I've spent a lot of time with Democrats in every corner of Wisconsin, across all these different communities,
Sure.
and people who, share some of the aspirational values of the party, but are frustrated with the party, angry with the party, feel like the party says it stands for things and doesn't fight for them. Then I ran for DNC chair, and I spoke to people all over the country. And the thing that strikes me so much is that there are two fundamental values that I think are at the heart of what the Democratic Party is about, that are actually shared really widely, both by the party and by its critics, not on the right, but people from the left to the broad center of the country. One is the belief that this country should work for working people, for everyone, not just the ultra wealthy. And the other is that every person, no matter the color of their skin or who they love, where they live, that every person has dignity and should be respected, that everyone has the spark of the divine, if you want to think of it in religious language, that we're all children of God. And that our policies and what the government does should reflect those two values, that the government should not be on the side of the powerful against those without so much power,
Right.
and that we should be protecting the fundamental freedoms and rights that people have fought for, and to try to expand that circle generation after generation, and are so often under attack. And those are values that are deeply, widely shared. And when I look at polls right now where people feel like really, really down on the Democratic Party, there are some people that don't share those values, and they oppose the Democrats because they think the Democrats hold those values and they oppose them. But the biggest share of the disapproval of the Democratic Party is from people who think that actually Democrats don't fight for those things, that the Democrats are on someone else's side, or serve some kind of special interest, or what have you, that they talk a good game but never walk the walk. They want Democrats to stand up for those beliefs. They want
Right.
someone to fight for those beliefs.
Right.
And my experience has been that when people running for office show that they're actually fighting for folks, and fighting for a country that works for everybody, not just for the few, then people rally to their side and are ready to support them. And so what we wind up with is a Democratic Party that people are really down on, but lots of individual Democrats, including President Obama, I think, really carried this spirit with him in a way that inspired people all over the country. But also I think Governor Evers and Senator Baldwin, who won last year, when you ask people why they supported her, it came down really to those things: the sense that she was on their side and she was trying to make it work for everybody. And what I want for the Democratic Party is to not just talk the talk, or even not just walk the walk, but to actually fight in a way that people can see that the Democratic Party is there for them when the chips are down. That, like, right now there are millions of Americans who might lose their health
definitely.
insurance, in short order in the next few months, if Republicans pass this giant tax cut for the ultra rich, paid for by cuts to Medicaid. That is going through the congressional process right now. And I think this is the kind of thing that is so personal to people who think about what it would be like to lose their health insurance right before they're going to have a child, or when they're in their most vulnerable moments, when they're sick, or trying to contend with and live with a disability. Democrats should make absolutely clear that this is a red line, that they're going to fight for people, and they're going to fight against those who think that we should rip up the common things that bind us together in order to give the scraps to the ultra rich who already have so much. And so that's what we've tried to do here in the state, and that I'm proud that we've been able to do in some big ways that I'm proud of at our state party. I think there's so much more to be done, but it's also what makes me think, that there's a central problem that so many people get their news about Democrats from Republicans, because Republicans have right-wing talk radio, and they now own what used to be Twitter and all these internet platforms. And
Right.
the amplification of them. They're local news media has been hollowed out and right-wing propaganda has filled in the void. And so people wind up hearing the Republican caricature, the version of what Democrats are. And Democrats have to be loud enough and clear enough and speak with their actions as well as their words so that they tell their own story.
And do they know how to do that, Ben?
Well, some of them do, and I hope all of them learn to.
And I'm asking that sincerely, not facetiously. I'm just asking,
Yeah.
do they really know? Because sometimes I'll see people that I'm rooting for. You know, you might see this in the NBA Finals or the semifinals, where there's a team you might really want to win.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, they're not trying tonight. They're not passing the ball. Like you're playing like you're sleepy. Come on.
Yeah.
Do you want it? So sometimes I just think, man, it sounds like the platform is, well, you don't want Trump or his cronies, right? So then vote for. And I'm thinking, but I want to be inspired. I want to hear.
You can't replace something with nothing.
Right. And sometimes that's the perception. So I guess I'm curious, whose job is it? Whose job is it to say that to the elected folks? Is it their constituents? Because I don't know if they're trying to hear that, but I would love to see them fight more, not just say we don't want more of Trump and his antics, but this is what we're doing and this is what we stand for. And don't forget, this is our platform. Maybe I'm just listening to the hollowed out kind of news version, but I'm not hearing that fight and that innovation, and it saddens me.
Yeah. I hear that. I hear that frustration, and that you're not alone. I mean, there are people all over the country who feel this way. One thing that happens to people in politics and is that often they'll actually have the right ideas. They'll fight for those ideas. They put out press release after press release. They give speeches. They might post something on YouTube or online. Almost nobody hears it. There's almost, it feels like you're yelling into the wind. And right now in Wisconsin, there's a debate over the state budget. The governor put forward a budget. He calls it the Year of the Kid, and he put forward basically the most pro-kid budget agenda that the state has ever seen. It has hundreds of millions of dollars to support childcare, so that families who are trying to figure out how to make sure their kids are safe when their parents go to work, that they'll have that support. It has support for kids' mental health in schools, which so many kids. Talk to any parent who has kids in school, and they will tell you how much kids are wrestling with the demons around mental health and loneliness. Support to help turn that around for folks all over the state. It actually funds schools that all over the state. Every year they're going to referenda because they're running out of money. They have to choose between laying off teachers or closing whole classrooms or their gym because they can't repair their facilities.
Right.
All this stuff, it's all in the governor's budget. And Republicans in the state legislature just voted to remove all those things from the budget this last week. And there's almost no coverage of any of this. So most Wisconsinites don't know the governor's fighting for all those things. And that there's a party that's saying no. Like, this is Democrats putting forward a positive agenda, a vision. The governor's mantra is what's best for our kids is what's best for the state. It is such a uniting, inspiring thing. Doesn't matter whether you live in a city, suburb, small town, the most rural area, everyone cares about their kids. Everyone wants their kids to succeed. And as Democrats, we believe that if someone else's kid succeeds, that doesn't mean our kid doesn't, and vice versa.
Right.
We want all the kids to succeed.
Right.
And that is the kind of agenda that can bring people together, but it's very hard to cut through. And I think that in some ways, what Democrats need to learn how to do is figure out ways to cut through the noise.
Right.
To make the fight visible that they're often doing in what feels like a vacuum. It feels like a no attention zone. And this is part of what's so maddening about this massive concentration of money and power in this country is that the world's richest man, Elon Musk, bought the website where every journalist in America spent half their day, which is Twitter, and now jacked up the algorithm. So, it's only the right-wing accounts that get a lot of traction. There's all these ways that the right has changed the way that information moves through our society to make the folks who are fighting for good invisible, and the folks who are trying to divide and demonize and attack to amplify their megaphone and turn it up to 11. And I think figuring out how to cut through that is a central challenge in this moment. And until we do that, it'll feel like everyone's on their own. And how is everyone,
right?
Why is everyone silent? Well, the reality is everyone is yelling, but no one can hear them. And it's when millions of people march, you can look out in the street and say, oh my God, I'm not the only one who feels this way. But we've got to figure out how to do that on every front all the time in all these different ways.
Right.
Because the reality is most people share these values. Most people actually want a country that works for everybody. And when we can see each other, we can realize our own power and we can build that country.
Now, he's the richest person, but he's not the smartest.
Oh, that's so true.
So how do we get two guys who are caricatures of power-filled men? I mean, he may be brilliant when it comes to SpaceX and things like this, but in terms of common sense, it's not like we're not looking at him saying that man is brilliant. And so how do we make sure that the Democratic platform isn't like they're taking our news, they're taking over, Twitter, they're doing this, they're saying this, they're creating this vacuum. What's to stop the party from going more grassroots or finding other ways to get to the folks?
You're putting your finger on it. That's exactly it.
Because I realize this, and this is probably one of the axes that I want to grind. And you all, Ben and I are friends. I've said before, his mom was one of my mom's professors back in, like our families, before we knew each other, our families knew each other. I volunteered in the FAST program, not knowing that your mom was the creator of Families in Schools Together. So our lives have intersected over the decades and not even realizing it. And so I want to see the party do better. But I realize we're dealing with a lot of stuff in the world. I don't get calls from folks saying, how do we help the Black community? How do we support Black children? How do we make sure that your Center for Black Excellence is going to uphold what critics of DEI or cultural celebrations are trying to eradicate? I don't get those calls. But when it's election time, like, hey, we got a van, we'll drive Black people to the polls. Hey, we got pizza. How can we help your Black people come and register to vote? So it's like there's unlimited resources and time and energy to focus on Black people. And I'm not just like the average Black guy. I'm the most tenured pastor, not only Black pastor, I'm the most tenured faith leader in the city. I got almost 40 years in. I've got connections. And I'm not clamoring to be in the know or to be seen or recognized in those circles. But they find me when it's election time, and they care so much about Black people to get into the polls because this one's for you. This one's for you. But then they're ignoring us pre-election, post-election, and that just seems to be the norm. And again, I ask another question, like, whose job is it to say, hey, 5% of the state's population is Black, and we can only find them when it's election time? Because I'm telling you, Ben, the silence is deafening. And if people connected with the Black community during ordinary times, the way they do during election times, and I mean, when I say people, I really mean our party, we could get so much done. So what do you want to say to I'm putting my friend Ben. What do you want to say to the Democrats out there? Because we're going to make sure, and I'm not talking about Mark and Tammy. They support us. They got us money out of Washington for the center.
But I will also say,
but there are times I have to say, "Hey, Tammy, a little louder. Hey, Mark, a little louder." But what can you say to folks to realize we're out here and we want to help, but we feel ignored, belittled, dismissed, and so when it comes up to election, a lot of Black people are saying, "Let's let the white people have it. Let's let them have Trump, Musk, whoever else they bring out because." They don't come for us. They don't celebrate us. And the truth of the matter is the Republicans will show up in places. We have to ask what they want, but they'll show up to at least show what we call in my line of work, the theology of presence, that I'm here. But what's the message that you would want to share to Democratic voters and Democrats in response to this feel of being dismissed as a large part of the Black community in the state of Wisconsin, at least in Dane County?
Well, I think the biggest thing is you do have to show up. And I will say, I hope that your experience with me as state party chair has been different from
of course,
this broader thing. And,
of course.
We've been able to work together on a number of things. That's meant a lot to me.
I just wish your peers followed suit, but yes, you have. You have.
So what we've done at the party is we built a team. So first thing I'll say is most state parties around the country, and historically, if you go back a decade before I was chair, if you go back to like 2009, most state parties have 5 or fewer staff. They are tiny. And Wisconsin, we haven't gone below 50 since I staffed up after I was elected. So we actually have a team that is capable of doing stuff. And we have an amazing group of folks. We built a year-round coalitions team. And so we have staff focused on working with the Black community and the Latino community and the AAPI community, Native American community, with rural folks, which is across race and ethnicity across the state of Wisconsin, and having staff, and they have programmatic budgets. So we sponsor events and we participate in stuff, and we sponsor communication things, and we'll partner with people and have booths and set up and sign people up to volunteer and get people to register to vote, not just right before an election, but year round.
Right.
Doing that, it takes resources and it takes an intention, and setting an intention to actually make that part of the work that the party does and put resources behind it so we're actually engaging. And that for me, part of my work and part of the way I structure my weeks and my months is checking in with different people across all the different communities, very much including Black communities in Wisconsin and not just in Milwaukee, in Dane County as well,
Sure.
and in other parts of the state. And it takes deciding to not just be putting out whatever fire is coming up. I think so often the people who work in politics are dealing with whatever's the emergency, whatever the thing is that's on the front page. But if you're only, dealing with the fires that come up, then you're not actually thinking about how to build something. You're just trying to avoid things getting burned down. And I think that's kind of my message. The first is that it is possible to fundraise in politics when you're doing something that actually inspires people and can move the needle. I have 6 weeks left as chair. 4 weeks left this year. Good gracious! I was
getting close.
Fundraising earlier today, and right now, what I'm talking to donors about is that I don't want us to stop organizing just because it's more than I guess at this point it's like 7 months or 10 months until the next election, April of 2026. So we have organizers on the ground right now. We have a week of community service coming up where we're organizing the volunteers who helped us win the Supreme Court race to do community service projects around the state, and that builds the fabric of our democracy. A lot of times in politics, people sort of, think that they can take their foot off the gas when there's not an election nearby.
Right.
And then people have the experience you're describing. They don't hear from people in the party, and it feels like they're being taken for granted. Mm-hmm. And if you're in a state, let's say in Nebraska, where I think they have like 4 or 5 staff at the party.
Wow.
Like they just don't have enough people to file their legally required campaign finance reports and organize their state party convention and plan what their, how they're going to set up their coordinated campaign for a year from now and actually connect with leaders of communities across the state. And so people feel like the Democratic Party is ignoring them. I think what seems like this giant center of power, the Democratic Party, it is a strikingly small number of people in most places. And it's so
I didn't realize that.
That's how you wind up with the deafening silence, is that there's nobody to talk. And so it takes building. It takes building an institution. I mean, you've built a number of major institutions, and the kind of care that it takes to have an institution that it has the strength to actually have that presence. It's not just about wanting to, it's actually having an organized basis to do it, having staff, building a culture within that staff, having resources so the staff can go do that work. And that's been my work as chair. That's what I'd like to see the Democratic Party do writ large. And I think that comes down to neighborhoods and counties and cities and states and the whole country. And I ran for DNC chair to do that. Now, it was a fascinating experience. Ultimately, the voters in the national committee, they just knew another candidate better because he'd been spending time all over the country while I was really focused on Wisconsin. And I credit him with that. But I hope that vision carries forward at the national level as well, because I think that showing up, it communicates so much.
It really does.
What it is that you say next, actually being in the room, at least so you can hear from people about what matters to them and what they want to do, and then you find common ground and you find a path to move forward together. And I think my hope is that Democrats do a lot more showing up in the years to come in Wisconsin and nationwide.
And Ben, you have shown up. I mean, if I send an email or a text message, you're responsive. And so certainly I want to make sure my listeners know that I was talking about showing up, not your department, but I mean elected officials, folks who find me and find us when it's election time, and then I won't hear from them again until it's the next, it's the next race. And so, I supported Susan Crawford. Friends approached me, they wanted her to come and speak at our church, but we didn't have a rapport and stuff. And I can't just say, yeah, just come up on stage on a Sunday. Like, there's a process. Like, I don't just, whatever people have been told about Black churches, I don't just get to run everything and tell people, hey, choir, cut it. We have a candidate here. Come on up, Madam Judge. But what I'm wondering is, when's the next time I'm going to hear from her people? And people have said, aren't we happy that she got elected? I don't know, because I don't know what that means for Black people. Yeah. I'm happy that Brad didn't get in, but I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
I don't know what it means that she's in. So, and this is not picking on her, because the person who's introducing us is a dear friend. But what I'm wondering is, will that same commitment of making sure she sits down with Black influencers, okay, now I'm in this role, I can breathe. We've gotten through this whole process. Let's talk about mass incarceration in the state of Wisconsin. I didn't hear any of that during the campaign. Let's talk about what's impacting Black folks traditionally. Let's talk about our court experiences. So the deep pain is not just that, what the heck, I got ignored, I should have been invited to the party. That's not it. I've got parishioners, I've got family members, I've got people who keep hoping.
Yeah.
And they vote and they campaign, and then they sit back and say, all right, that same phone call, that same email, that same person is going to reach out to me and say, hey, can you come to a lunch, or can Justice Crawford sit down and talk with you? I feel that unless I initiate that, it's not going to happen. But I didn't initiate having someone drive people to the poll. I didn't initiate her coming to my church.
Right.
And so that's a piece I'm wanting people to think about as well, because I mean, you're in this world, so I'm sure you got probably a more accurate in a sense based on empirical data on the attitudes of Black people towards the ballot box and voting. But that's a significant amount of people who can network, who can talk, who can campaign, if they can believe. There's a lot of folks, surprisingly, who just don't turn out, not for fear that the candidate that they want won't get elected, but for the fear of the deafening silence once they get in.
That you elect someone and then nothing happens, nothing changes.
So we don't know if she's protecting us,
Yeah.
because if we don't hear it in the campaigning phase, and then we don't hear anything afterwards, we're thinking, okay, we helped to elect someone else that's going to make Wisconsin life better for white people, and this is the most publicly contested and expensive race. So it got a whole lot of attention about Wisconsin's progressive politics, which I'd long to be true. But if I never hear from those same folks again who have my cell number, my email number, my home address, they know where my office is, if I don't hear back, this aggregate anger and frustration is either going to chase people to be independents, to be no-shows, and there's some are dancing, with the consideration of being Republicans.
Would be, as long as the Republicans don't have to change any of their policies, they're delighted to welcome.
Of course.
To have, Black supporters and people switching sides. It's just that then they keep doing the policies that are so harmful to.
No, I got you. And Black people don't want to feel like we're going to be screwed whether we're red or blue. But
I totally hear your point, and I will say I don't think this is initiated on Susan Crawford, who's a great judge.
No,
and
exactly.
She's taking office in August, so she's not even in the office yet. I think part of how this happens on the other side of the equation is when you're a candidate, you have a little tiny team, and then it grows and grows and grows, and it gets bigger and bigger, and there's all these different people responsible for making sure you use every minute effectively, that you're connecting with folks in the whole electorate, and then the night of the election, almost everyone's job is over, and then maybe one person is like filing the final paperwork, and then you're on your own, and then there's some gap, and then you're sworn into your office or whatever.
That's helpful information.
And it is a very weird experience for them, because they're at the center of this huge swirling vortex of people being like, here's a list of 25 people you should call. You have 10 appointments today. You're going to be speaking here, here, and here. And then it's like, try to recover.
Sure.
Reintroduce yourself to your family. And then I've spoken to people who elected judicial office. Once you're elected, there's not really anyone to tell you, here's how to be an effective judge, unless you've found mentors or found people to help you do it. And this is something that I hope that the next state party chair can work to try to do, and something that I think would be good to do is to have more support and mentorship for people who are entering office to continue building relationships and really have that continued engagement. And some people are great at this. It just comes naturally to them.
Sure.
And for some people, Wisconsin especially, the Supreme Court is a good example. We have one of the most intensely contested and battled state Supreme Courts in the country. And so, I think especially when you've had the experience of being ignored and having people say a lot of stuff and then not follow through,
right?
People have to earn trust. You don't start with the presumption of trust until someone gives you a reason not to trust them. And I think for Democratic elected officials, people of any party, if with the Black community, so many people have heard a million promises that then weren't kept, or policies that people fought for that then never actually turned into law. And I think there is an extra urgency for people to do that follow-up call when they're not asking for a vote, and to check in and touch base about,
because we want to be won over. We really, it's not like, again, like egos are at play. We really want to, be a force. We want to be helpful. We want to know that it matters. So I think it's important for folks to know that we're not just complaining and griping. Man, oh man, is it crazy out here. And I don't think it's just me. Look, it's 2025. Trump is back in office, and some days it seems as if the sky is falling. There's so much uncertainty in the world right now, but I love that sitting down right here in front of this mic and letting the hard truths rumble out of my heart and off my chest is as certain as it ever was. Season 11 is gathering steam, and you're in for a real treat. Let me just tell you. When I reflect back on all the seasons that we dropped here at Black Like Me podcast, each of them has had a special purpose, a one-of-a-kind lineup of guests, and its own unique feel. I also think about the thread that binds them all together. What we do here at Black Like Me is unique. I don't have another space that feels just like this, where I can really speak from my unique perspective, and the guests who have on the show remark that these interviews they do here are unlike any others that they've done in other places. Sure, nobody else does Black Icebreakers, but that's only part of it. We have created a truly unique space here where honest conversations about the thoughts, the ideas, the policies that affect Black people and that Black people care deeply about. And you know what? It isn't easy. And I don't do this all alone. I have an incredible team that has steadily grown over the years, and each person that joins adds another asset to what we can do here. And all of you that support us on Patreon, my people, my people, my people. We simply would not be able to do what we do or get what we have gotten without you. So as we look to even bigger and better things in the coming season, please help support the show right now by clicking the link to Patreon in the show notes and join the community of people supporting this unique and provocative space. In the world that we're living in, where there's so much attack on our perspectives, our history, our bodies, and our lives and contributions, aren't you glad you have a place where you can still hear powerful, exhilarating, intellectual Black thought like you do? I enjoy it. And so if you do too, share the good news, tell friends, click that Patreon link now. Thank you so much for your support of Black Like Me podcast with Dr. Alex G. You know, Ben, when I hear you talk about these things, your thoughts, your demeanor, your attitude, I become even more sad that you're not in this role anymore. So,
I'm not.
Are you going to run? Are you going to run for something, Ben?
Maybe down the road.
Maybe down the road.
Yeah, my first thing, I want to write a book about kind of what we've learned from this experience in Wisconsin, and because I think there's things that we've learned here, we've done or tried to do that have made a real difference that I think we're going to need as a country now. Because we had this experience in Wisconsin of, it's not like everything was perfect before, but when Walker came in and started defunding schools and smashing unions and rigging the vote, suppressing the vote, targeting Black voters and young voters in particular, locking in power, and then essentially just pulling funds and resources and support out of everything that served the public interest in order to help a handful of its billionaires, it's taken 15 years to get back to the point now where we're just on the cusp of maybe being able to pass, laws that would actually move the state forward. Defeating Scott Walker in 2018 was just the start of the fight. They immediately had a special session of the legislature, took power away from the governor and the attorney general.
Yes, that's right.
And then they had the state Supreme Court, and they've had the legislature. And I think the country, we've got to kind of gear up for the fact that ending Trump's presidency, which, God help us, I hope happens, in 2028, that's not going to be the end of this fight either.
That's what I keep telling people. They still have
the U.S. Supreme Court. They have majorities in both houses of Congress right now. This is a long fight, and you have to find joy in that. You have to find community in that. You have to find things that can give you energy, even when it feels like it's 2 steps forward, 1, 2, or 3 steps back. But at the same time, there are things that we can all do that do make a difference. And if we can zero in on those and find the things that have the biggest impact on how to move forward, and then celebrate those successes and recognize that each of us has this extraordinary gift, the power that we have as people with a voice in a society where we can still use that voice with a vote for those of us who have the vote. Like that is this extraordinary gift that almost no one in human history has had, the power to vote out someone who wants to be a tyrant. if we use those powers, then
That's very true.
There is this long fight where we can actually create positive change. So that's my next immediate project, is to try to get this out of my head and onto the page, and hopefully be able to light some fires.
When it's written, can I get you to come back here? You're not going to be too big headed. I'm kidding, Ben. I know you wouldn't do that. Ben, the work that you did on MoveOn.org captured the energy of those that opposed Clinton's impeachment. Can there be another technical social media grassroots kind of movement to move against the tyranny of Trump? I mean, it may not be MoveOn.org, but are there other entities out there that you're hoping will galvanize people and mobilize folks? Because that was a force. Like, I heard about that before I met you. So when I met you, I said, wait, you're that guy? First of all, I thought you were too young to be that person. And then I found out you're from Madison and you went to, the same high school years after I did. But your reputation preceded you. So, do you think that there's some opportunities for a similar movement in against what we're experiencing now?
So one thing that's so striking is that there's this public narrative that the public is not outraged and is not mobilized. That it's not like the first Trump presidency where there was the Women's March and then March after March. But if you drill into the numbers, more people have protested this Trump presidency by this time, just 100-something days into the administration, than had protested Trump in 2017, the first time he was elected. There's actually more public pushback. There have been 131 cases where the Trump administration has lost in court. There have been thousands and thousands of protests all over the nation. There's been every election that's happened, local special elections for state legislature, mayors, the Wisconsin Supreme Court, that Democrats and pro-democracy people have won by dramatically more. They've done, I think, an average of 9 points better than they did in 2024. The pushback is here. We just don't quite recognize it yet. And I should say about MoveOn, I joined MoveOn and I'm really proud of the work I did there years after it launched. So it started fighting back against the impeachment. Then it worked against the Iraq War, which is such a terrible and disastrous war. I started my first time working with them was in the 2008 presidential election to help support President Barack, or future President Barack Obama, and then worked with them again to fight against the repeal of the Affordable Care Act and support the Obama administration and the end of the second administration. But now there's a whole bunch of different groups, and there's Indivisible, which has these grassroots chapters all over Wisconsin, all over the country. There's a group called 5051 that means 50 protests in 50 state capitals on one day, and they're helping organize protest after protest. There's this extraordinary collection of Black influencers and podcasters and folks doing new media and galvanizing and connecting with a ton of people outside of the kind of corporate-owned media that I think has a really, and you're a part of that with Black Like Me podcast. But there's a whole bunch of stuff that's happening kind of outside of the official bubble that in fact is moving people into action in a really spectacular way. And I
love hearing that.
It is. When you see it, I go on conference calls every morning and hear about these different fights that are happening, and I get so much energy from that, because it's the hardest part is when you feel like things are going so wrong and no one's doing anything, and that can create cynicism and despair and this feeling of wanting to withdraw from politics altogether. And if I'm the only person who cares, or just me and my friends, then what's the point of any of this if we're not going to fight back? But in fact, there is a burgeoning movement across the country to fight back and to build something better, and that that's
good news.
It is urgently important news. This is a time when every day, if you open up your phone and get news alerts, you're going to see some horrible additional thing that's happened.
That's why I don't open it. That's why I don't open it.
Because that's exactly what happens. People withdraw, and I totally get it. And my wife and I have a rule that we can't read the news before bed. We can't tell each other what's happening before bed, because today it's another 60-year civil rights law that's been ripped up by the Trump administration. The next day they've decided to end federal support for cancer research, and the next day Trump's accepting a $400 million plane from a foreign dictatorship. What is going on? But if you take a step back from all that, what Trump is doing, unlike a lot of countries where would-be dictators take power and they become very popular very fast, what Trump is doing is repugnant to the vast majority of Americans. He is now less popular. He's lost more popularity than any other president this fast in their presidency in the history of modern polling. Yes. He started out popular, and it was shocking. And a lot of Democrats, people in politics can fall into this thing of kind of, licking their finger and holding it up to figure out which way the wind is blowing and saying, well, maybe we'll just find our common ground with Donald Trump. when they knew who he is and they could guess what he's going to try to do. But he is now a profoundly unpopular president. And what we found in the Supreme Court race, Elon Musk, really unpopular, and we were able to mobilize people to support Susan Crawford in part to say no to Elon Musk trying to buy the Supreme Court election. But an even larger share of voters in the poll afterwards said they were trying to send a message to Donald Trump. That Brad Schimmel, he campaigned on how Trump had endorsed him and Trump was supporting him and he was Trump's guy and he was going to do whatever Trump wanted and that the courts needed to stop being against the Trump agenda. And voters said absolutely not. And that big majority, which is a multiracial, multi-generational coalition across the country, I think its voice is going to be heard in these years to come. And that, eventually there'll be a presidential race and we'll have to choose the nominee. And we all hope that we find someone who brings together these values and can really fight and champion. But until then, there's going to be many, many heroes. And there are people running for city council, and there are people running for Congress, and there are people running for, state legislature and state offices. And there'll be thousands of cases where people take a stand for something and people rally to their side and they win an election. And then they do, as you note, they have to actually carry it through and stay in touch with the communities that brought them to the dance and actually show up and deliver. Right. And to me, that the essence of politics, it's not about winning or losing. It's about the change you actually make in people's lives. That's the only real yardstick that matters. What's the point of any of this if you don't actually do something with it? And I think this can be, and it has to be, this kind of moment of maximum peril where it seems like everything that could possibly go wrong is in fact going wrong. This has to be where the green shoots start to pierce up through the ashes.
It's the darkest before the dawn.
It's darkest before the dawn, and we just have to build the dawn.
I need you to write that book quickly so we can get you to a political office. I need you to get that so we can get you to what's next, man. Listen, tell me, are you able to comment on this? David Hogg and the work that he's doing to mobilize leaders we deserve, that pact. And, this initiative is trying to defy the Democratic Party leadership, but putting forth young, diverse, interested candidates, in the primaries. Are you able just to comment about just your feel about that? Is there some upside or downside? Because I look at that and I think, is this the wave of the future? Is this divisive or is this galvanizing? I don't know how to read it, but whenever I see young, energetic leadership, I know that it can be unbridled, but I also think, but man, that's how we get stuff done. So I'm just curious about, as a seasoned veteran, how do you feel about the work? Not him personally, but just the work and what he's attempting to do.
So there's sort of two sides to this. So one is he is now a vice chair of the National Democratic Party.
Right.
The other is that he's doing this Leaders We Deserve, which has supported great young candidates in Wisconsin and across the country. And there's a tension between this question of what the role of the party is, because when people feel as though some external force at the party came in and put its thumb on the scale in terms of choosing who their candidate would be, people are furious about that. And I totally get that frustration that voters should decide who's going to be their candidate, who's going to represent them, who they're going to be able to vote for. And I get the argument that you kind of have to choose whether you're going to be the party, which is the big tent for everybody that is not taking sides in intra-party battles, or are you going to be kind of in an insurgency of doing primary challenges and making the case for a particular candidate in a primary against another one? And so I think the challenge of this is that he's got a foot in both or both feet in both universes at this moment, and that creates a challenge when you're trying to build a party that feels like an honest broker to everybody involved. And at the same time, a lot of that energy of saying to folks, you gotta lead, or but I remember as an
lead,
activist,
follow,
get out of the way.
Right.
That's often, that energy can be a really powerful and positive galvanizing force. But having it come from the party is a little bit awkward place if the party is the place where everyone comes together to figure out what everyone has in common. So I think that's the tension that's at the heart of this. To me, the actual, what gets me up in the morning is figuring out how we can bring folks together to support people to win elections that can then actually go out and do it, and then supporting them as they go out and do that work. That's, when I think about the work of winning Governor Evers, when he won in 2018 and ended Scott Walker's governorship, that was great. But it's when he actually governs and actually brings increased funding for education, or acknowledges that climate change is actually happening and helps communities around the state actually deal with it. That's the payoff. That is the thing that all this was bent towards supporting. And that's so I've tried to really focus as chair on general elections, on when it's Democrats versus Republicans, and trying to have a fair process along the way. But it's in our Constitution in the Wisconsin Democratic Party that we are neutral in primaries unless there's an extraordinary circumstance. It requires a 3/4 vote of our governing body to have any other position. And I think that's an important for the role of the party as an institution.
Sure. Do you see any of yourself in Hogg?
I mean, I've been that guy. Yeah.
So there's hope for him?
Oh yeah. No, he's brilliant. He's got a ton of fire in the belly.
Sure.
And, he's out there fighting the fight. And you look at where he comes from with the mass shooting at Parkland High School.
Exactly.
He experienced the worst form of brokenness in the system when kids lose their lives. And this is something that happens in tons of communities across the country in all kinds of different ways.
It's credible.
And that is what pushed him to get into political work in a way that I think he's already seen how bad things can get. So the prospect of people being frustrated about this or that, party rule is not the most terrifying prospect for him. And as part of the beauty of democracy is that you have, some people that are institutionalists and trying to preserve an institution, some people that are disruptors and they're trying to, push things forward. And the negotiation between them, the AOCs and the Nancy Pelosi's, when they had all these epic classes when they're in the House together. That's just part of the dynamic in any institution and in a democracy and in the Democratic Party itself. I think that some people get frustrated when these kinds of battles happen within the Democratic Party. The thing that ultimately is going to energize people is that battle against that attack on healthcare that's happening right now, against that tax cut for the ultra rich, when Democrats are fighting for the things that touch people in their lives. And that's the thing I'm itching to get towards, is when we're really out there fighting that fight and then making the case that that elected officials should be held accountable for the consequences of their actions in people's lives, not just in the pages of Politico or the whatever's happening in the kind of political junkie world, but actually in communities, in people's homes, in their doctor's offices, because this stuff is actually life or death. And that to me is where we have to bring our energy in the biggest way.
Sure. And I think it's also fair that the Democratic Party and influencers can explore the breadth of what it means to be Democratic. Absolutely. I hate being put in a box thinking if there's only one form of blackness. But at some point, we have to agree to an agenda and move in the same direction. So for me, it's not difficult that not everyone agrees with what Hogg does or he challenges things. At the end of the day, can the party galvanize itself in order to move on an agenda that makes the party look relevant and caring and diverse and open-minded? And so I can see good coming out of that. If nothing else, that it pushes folks to understand, well, maybe we need to listen to some of these new perspectives, because maybe he's dialed into something that we've forgotten or we don't listen to. We have that with younger and older Black leaders. I love seeing it with white leaders because it's only called out with us. Like, how do younger Black leaders feel about older Black leaders? Do you feel like you've got space? That when I was a younger Black leader, I love that this is a universal issue.
Intergenerational conflict in the white community. It's a real thing.
Yes.
And it's an American thing. That's one thing that I like about this country, is that there is not just the dominance who forever has power. There is flux. There is dynamism. There is a chance to challenge, and that's how we move forward. And nobody has all the answers, right? And it's important to have enough space that different voices can be heard, so we can actually figure out the way forward.
I know we're winding up because I want to be respectful of your time, but you mentioned earlier that Trump's popularity is going down. Yes, it seems like his stranglehold is getting stronger. So not that I'm asking you to speak for Republicans, but in a way, I think I am. Not that you're one, but just what you've seen. These aren't like when people just say, "Oh, Republicans are, less intelligent or they're less caring." I don't believe that. I don't think you can just paint that it's so broadly. But the ones who are sitting silent while this is happening, aren't they going to have relatives that will have their health care slashed? Like, aren't they? So are they afraid? Does he have photos of them? Does he have like the goods on them? Are they afraid of losing constituents? When you look across the aisle, I can't imagine that if you were a senator or a congressperson, you would watch a Democratic president do things that's so egregiously wrong and insensitive and embarrassing to the nation that you wouldn't take them to the side and say, "Hey, chill. This is not the platform. This is not the vision." Why is that not happening? Or is he?
Well, I will say Trump is legendary for his vindictiveness and his thirst for vengeance against when he feels like a Republican has crossed him.
Okay. So they really are afraid.
Yes, they're afraid, and they're not just afraid for their political careers. Several of them have said publicly that they're afraid for their and their family's safety, that Trump and Musk will essentially sick, online mobs against them, and then they'll get death threats at home. They'll have, I've talked to Republicans who've had, people sitting outside their houses in their cars, and they call law enforcement, and they, it's terrifying for them. So that's a real dynamic in our politics right now. Now, some of this is just different political values and agreement, different views about how to solve society's problems. But Trump has brought this really malign force that's always lurked in some ways in different parts of American politics right to the forefront, which is a kind of a bullying and a politics that's centered around dominance and getting people to kiss the ring and bend the knee and do his bidding, not because they think it's the right thing, but because he's the one commanding them to do it. When he announces that the Gulf of Mexico should be called the Gulf of America, that's not about his views on geographic nomenclature. That's about trying to see who will obey him with something that looks ridiculous, who will humiliate themselves to show that they're loyal to him. And then he'll attack the people that don't, to make an example of them, to try to get other people to come into line. It's a classic move of a dictator. But that's how the Republican Party is dominated right now. And I have spoken to Republicans who have told me, like I did spent a lot of time in 2024 reaching out to different Republicans, former Republican legislators about, endorsing Kamala Harris, and had conversations with people who told me that they knew that Trump was wrong for the country, that they knew that Harris would be far better, even if they disagreed with her in different policies, but they were scared about what would happen to their families and their communities if they came out and were publicly identified with this. So it is a profoundly, not just troubling, but really...
that's frightening.
Frightening and outrageous, like a really dangerous, malign force in American politics right now. And to me, it makes it urgent that that kind of politics fail. Right now, Trump is the most popular, most successful Republican politician of the last 20 years, hands down. So if you're a Republican, would-be politician who wants to rise and go as far as you possibly can in politics, if you look around for role models, you see Donald Trump. And there's all these people trying to follow in his footsteps. That's how you get these kind of people like Ron DeSantis who just look around for the most vulnerable or isolated person or community, and then they pummel them to show their power. That's like the model that Republicans have for what political success looks like. And I think the big job for all of us as a country is to make that so clearly a failed political project, that something that will not get anyone the power that they crave or the influence that they crave, that Republicans decide to go in a different direction. I think it is one of the great tragedies that Trump came in. And if you ask people who voted for Trump this time who didn't before, it's usually the economy. They remember the checks that he signed. They remember how prices were lower. They just wanted to, bring down the cost of stuff. They didn't want what he's doing now. But it's the fact that he's now back in power and doing all this means we have even more work to do to make clear that this is not the kind of country that we aspire to be, and that following in Trump's footsteps to do this and to operate through fear and domination instead of people's aspirations and bringing people together, that is not the way to succeed in American politics. We want it so that if you dream of being a politician, you think about how to bring people together, how to bridge divides, how to find common ground. Like that should be the recipe for political success. That's the kind of Wisconsin and country we want to build. And
we're building quite the opposite. I'm sure you're familiar with these reels where you see a split screen and black women are eating popcorn or they're vacuuming while white women are crying and bemoaning the fact that they lost jobs, lost funding because of things that Trump has done. Sort of this attitude of particularly black women who we saw really soar in the political world, particularly with Democrats, because of elections they saved, candidates they stood up for. Do you think people are paying attention that these reels are not predominantly men looking at these situations saying, I told you all, but it's black women who in many ways has really secured the party? I guess I'm wondering, do you think other elected officials are noticing that? And are you confident that the party is making darn sure that black women are feeling some sense of vindication, that they're coming into the party, that they're going to be supported in not only doing things behind the scenes, but up on the stage? Because we lost to Trump and black women watched America choose a tyrant over a black woman. So in your circles, are people just saying we need a strategy, we need a plan surrounding the Black woman, we need to have people sit down and talk with us about what we can do? Is it taking that seriously, or is there just sort of the assumption that just give them a little time and Black women take care of everybody, and she'll come around and just say, "Come on, baby, let me make it all right"? Do they understand how hurt and disappointed Black women are, and are they planning to do something meaningful?
I think there's a real sense. I mean, certainly Black women in my life and in Democratic politics in Wisconsin. But my sense, when I was running for DNC chair, I reached out to and talked to almost every member of the Democratic National Committee. I think there's a real shared sense. Black women turned out for Kamala Harris at explosive levels, explosive margins, and they were right. And the country really has something to learn from them, and to honor the work that they undertook and continue to undertake. Angela Alsobrooks was just elected. We now have there are 2 Black women senators for the first time, I think, in American history, simultaneously, from Delaware and from Maryland.
Wow.
And there are Black women who are leading the way in the House and the Senate, and I think there's a real chance that we'll have our first Black women governors in 2026. And there's a leadership class, the cohorts of Black women leaders across the country, who are really at a core part of the promise of what the party could be going forward. And my sense is that there's that shared recognition. And at the same time, circling back to what you said earlier, for so many people, especially Black women who pour themselves, they started the Black women, the Win with Black Women Zoom that then, led to the Win with Black Men. And I wound up being one of the white dudes for Harris on a whatever, the 10th or 12th call or whatever.
Right.
White guys, we were
That
a little
was
late to the party.
to see, yeah.
But there's so many people who poured themselves into that election. And then it felt like this repudiation for someone who obviously is a less good candidate. How is it possible that we chose this guy? And I think recognizing that hurt that is going to continue, and that ultimately we're going to have to find ways to bridge together and lift folks up and honor the work that they do, and make sure that is not just work behind the scenes and not just labor, unseen, invisible labor, but that actually we're a party where everyone brings their fullest selves and sees each other and recognizes it. I don't think there's a path forward to victory that doesn't include that.
Sure. And do you feel good about that because you're idealistic, or because you're hearing murmurs of people saying we got to do right by Black women? Like, are you hearing conversations that are making you think, I think people are starting to realize we can't keep doing this to the Black community, and particularly the Black women? So, is it based upon things you're hearing?
I hear some of both. So I hear some of those conversations in exactly the way that you'd hope. Then there's other conversations, like there's going to be a whole debate, a national debate about what the path forward is for the party. And I think that there are some Democrats who kind of internalize the Republican message about what's wrong with Democrats and are making that argument. And I think that there's a trap there that people can walk into. It's not the case that someone who is mad about the cost of housing voted against Democrats because Democrats had embraced Black Lives Matter. They might feel like they were not being embraced for their economic pain, but it's not an either or. And there's a kind of idea that Democrats cared too much about the Black community or the LGBT community or whatever community. Mostly that is driven by Republicans saying Democrats care about them, not about you. And the them is always someone else, and the you is whoever they're talking to. And it's actually possible for us to be a country that cares about everybody. And it should be. It should be, and at our best, it can be. And that's, what's happening right now when Trump defunds the National Institutes for Health because they have researched Black child mortality and Black maternal mortality. They say that this is woke research, and so we're just going to cut it all. That's what's happening in department after department after department. And they're using anti-Blackness as an excuse to attack everybody. This is Heather McGhee wrote this amazing book called The Sum of Us, and she talked about drain the pool economics, about how after integration, there were communities that had public swimming pools that were a wonderful resource that they filled with concrete. They drained and filled with concrete because they would rather not have a swimming pool than to have a swimming pool that Black families could use as well as white families.
Cutting off your nose to spite your face.
Exactly. And I feel like Trump is doing drain the ocean economics. He is just saying, anything that benefits somebody who doesn't look like me, Donald Trump, we're just going to get rid of it completely, and nobody's going to have it. And I think I don't want Democrats to fall into the trap of thinking that following him there is the path to political salvation. I think it is the exact opposite of that. And I think that we, as a country, in fact, we can recognize when someone's trying to divide us and insist that it's zero sum. That the way Democrats operate is by growing the pie, by making the case that we're all in this together, and that it doesn't take away anything from a white family to make sure that a black family can afford the food and medicine that they need, and and vice versa. That in fact, lifting up everyone works better for everyone. Paul Wellstone used to say, "We all do better when we all do better," and I think that there's a real political error, not just a moral error, for people to think that the path forward to defeating Trump's brand of politics is to become more Trumpy and to find ways of punching the most marginalized in order to demonstrate to other people that you're on their side. No, that is not how it works.
That's going to get us in a heap of trouble.
That's going to get us into trouble, and that is the wrong way to go. And the other thing is, if you do that kind of politics just to get elected, you're not going to be able to wake up and look yourself in the mirror. That I think that a politics that flows from the convictions that make us proudest of who we are can both be good politics and also allow us to actually do things once we've won that power instead of being scared of our own shadows politically. And that's the direction I hope we go.
Yes. Man, Ben, remind me, how long have you been the chair of the Wisconsin Democrats?
I was elected in June of 2019. So this is the end of my 6th year is coming up in a few weeks.
Listen, I said this earlier, I just want to laud you just for your work. I feel that you put a different and a fresh face on it, and places where I do have hope have been places where you've worked and where you brought people together. And I have to honestly admit, you said a lot of things that have caused me to think and feel inspired to believe that this isn't all about America going to hell in a handbasket, that there are options. And that's important to feel. I don't like feeling backed into a corner like there's no other options. And so I really appreciate your honesty in communicating with us here. And I wish you every success in the future. Wisconsin needs you. The nation needs you. I can't wait for that book to come out for 2 reasons. I want to read it. 2, I want to talk to you about it on here. But just take time so that you can care for yourself and be with your family, because you're young and there's so much more that you can contribute, but you need time to reflect and look at what you've done and dream about the future. And I'm glad that you're just in tune enough to take space to do that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and thanks for having me on.
Oh, of course.
I love this conversation.
Listen, as we're wrapping up, I just wanted to say to our listeners, I told you this was going to be another good one. Please check out our new public-facing group on Facebook. I want you to join the conversation because it doesn't have to stop here. I want to thank my wonderful team that helps me to bring these great interviews and episodes to you. Eli Steenledge and Jeremy Holliday, who produce and edit the show wonderfully. Don Thornton, who secures our great guests. Ariana Proctor, who curates and moderates the listener space. Jakesha Hunt, who handles our wonderful podcast merchandise. For those of you that have clicked that Patreon link so that you support this podcast, we're here because of you. You help to give us the support we need to bring you this quality, well thought out, well planned, and well articulated podcast. I appreciate you. And to all of the listeners, you really make Black Like Me podcast so special. So listen, don't just see this as a moment of entertainment. You need to share this. You need to repost this. You need to write comments. You need to interact on our Facebook page so that we can keep this conversation going, because we don't want to just give you something to entertain you. We want you to lean in and become a part of the change that we really all need you to be. So take a moment, take some time, and do that. Thank you all for your support for Black Like Me podcast with Dr. Alex G. Have a great day.
Black Like Me. Black like me.
I want to thank you for taking time to listen to this episode of Black Like Me podcast with Dr. Alex G. If you like that opening track of our theme song, you can show your appreciation to Corey Saffold, who created that and produced it, and Marcus Fleming, my cousin, who's on vocals. I also want to say that this podcast was started with the generous support of the Human Family Unity Foundation, and so we always want to stop and thank them for that. For the many patrons who support us through our Patreon page, thank you, thank you, thank you. You don't just listen, but you support, you lean in, and you help this podcast to be what it is. And then I need to thank you, the listeners, who make a point of downloading this, listening to it, and sharing it. Without all of you, this podcast would not be what it is and what it's becoming. Thank you so much.